The morning started like any other, until the ground began to shake. Hannah dropped her coffee mug and rushed to the window, expecting thunder. Instead, a black helicopter hovered above her driveway, wind tearing through her garden. And when the door opened, the man she'd bought coffee for yesterday stepped out, smiling like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. The morning rush had turned the corner cafe into a blur of motion, steam rising, cups clinking, and the low murmur of half-awake conversation. The line inched forward with the impatience of a Monday. When the man in front of Hannah reached the counter, he hesitated. His rough hands dug into the pockets of a worn jacket, pulling out 2 crumpled dollar bills and a handful of coins that didn't quite add up. The barista's polite smile faltered. The people behind them sighed audibly, one woman tapping her heel, another checking her watch. But Hannah, standing right behind him, saw something in his posture, a quiet defeat that looked all too familiar. Without thinking, she stepped forward. "I've got it," she said softly. The man turned, surprised. "You don't have to." "I know," she interrupted with a small smile, "but I want to." Their eyes met briefly, his tired and uncertain, hers calm but weary in their own way. He nodded, murmured a quiet thanks, and stepped aside. The barista took Hannah's card without a word, the tension in the room dissolving as quickly as it had built. When the man received his cup, he lingered awkwardly by the door, unsure how to show what the moment meant. He looked back once more, taking in the sight of her, brown curls tucked under a wool hat, coat sleeves pushed up, a paper bag and a child's lunchbox waiting on the counter. A single mom, maybe. Someone who knew what it meant to stretch $1 and still offer warmth to a stranger. "Thanks," he said again, voice barely above the hum of the espresso machine. She smiled. "Mondays are hard enough. Take the win." He almost laughed, the sound foreign to him after so many silent mornings. As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. Probably her job calling, probably another late start, but she didn't rush. She walked out with quiet steadiness, balancing her coffee, the lunchbox, and her small paper bag as if she'd done it all her life. Outside, the mist clung to the streetlights, soft and gray. The man watched her until she disappeared around the corner, her figure fading into the fog. He didn't know her name, but something about that moment, simple, unremarkable to anyone else, stayed with him. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel invisible. And though neither of them knew it, that single act, an extra cup of coffee, had already begun rewriting both their stories. The house creaked softly when the heater came on, the sound blending with the gentle breathing of a sleeping child. Hannah sat on the edge of her daughter's bed, the dim lamplight brushing across faded wallpaper covered in hand-drawn stars. Lily's curls peeked out from under the blanket, her small hand still clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd refused to replace for years. "Mom," Lily murmured sleepily, eyes half closed. "Why do you always help people?" Hannah smiled faintly and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Because one day, sweetheart, someone will help us when we least expect it." The little girl nodded, already drifting away. Hannah stayed there for a moment longer, listening to the steady rhythm of her daughter's breathing. Then she stood, closing the door quietly and walking into the small kitchen. The sink held a few unwashed dishes, and a calendar on the fridge showed overdue bills clipped beneath a magnet shaped like a sun. She sighed, pouring herself the last of the coffee from that morning, the same blend she'd bought for a stranger. She wondered where he was now. Probably back at work, probably just another tired soul trying to hold things together. It hadn't been charity, it had been recognition. She'd seen in his eyes the same kind of exhaustion that stared back at her in the mirror. Across town, Ryan Cooper sat alone at a kitchen table cluttered with blueprints and coffee-stained napkins covered in messy sketches. The small apartment hummed with the faint buzz of an old fluorescent light. His hands, rough from years in the garage, traced the outline of a machine he had almost given up on. A portable rescue drone, the last project his late wife, Emma, had designed before cancer took her. He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion and grief weighing on him in equal measure. "You'd laugh if you saw this, Emma," he whispered, staring at the blinking light on the small prototype. "But maybe it's finally working." His phone buzzed suddenly, lighting up the table. A message from a number he hadn't seen in months. "Saw your demo video. Call me. Could be big." Ryan froze, rereading the message, his pulse quickening. Hope felt foreign. almost unwelcome, after so many years of disappointment. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling shakily. The blinking light on the drone pulsed softly in the dark, like a heartbeat. Outside, the wind rattled the thin windows of his apartment, carrying the faint hum of the distant city. Hannah and Ryan, unaware of each other's thoughts, both sat in the quiet, two tired souls on opposite sides of town, each holding on to something fragile but alive. Neither of them knew it yet, but the small kindness shared that morning had already set something vast in motion. The next morning broke with the pale stillness of dawn, the kind that made every sound feel sharper. Hannah stood by the kitchen sink, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, staring through the small window at the quiet street outside. Lily was still asleep, her backpack ready by the door. The smell of toast lingered faintly in the air. Then, without warning, the window rattled. A deep, rhythmic thunder rolled through the air, not from the clouds, but from above. Hannah frowned, setting her mug down. The noise grew louder, more distinct, until the entire house trembled. "What on earth?" she whispered, stepping to the front door. When she opened it, the wind hit her first, strong, whipping through her hair and robe. The sight that met her eyes seemed almost unreal. A black helicopter hovered over her driveway, its blades cutting the morning light into flashing fragments. Neighbors spilled out of their houses, phones raised, voices rising in disbelief. Hannah's heart pounded. She shielded her eyes from the swirling dust as the helicopter lowered, its landing gear touching the cracked pavement of her small yard. The air roared with power. The door of the aircraft swung open, and a man stepped out in a dark suit, followed by another figure that made her freeze. It was him, Ryan Cooper, the man from the coffee shop. Only now he looked nothing like the grease-stained mechanic she remembered. His jacket was pressed, his posture firm, and behind him stood a small boy, clinging shyly to his leg. "Hannah Miller," he called out over the noise. She could barely hear him above the pounding blades. "Yes." He smiled, genuine, certain, the kind of smile that carried meaning. "You bought me coffee yesterday. I think it's time I return the favor." The neighbors gasped. Someone across the street dropped a watering can. Hannah just stood there on her porch, her mug still in hand, its warmth long gone. The morning sun reflected off the helicopter's polished surface, throwing glints of light across her face. "Ryan," she managed, half laughing, half stunned. "What is this?" He stepped closer, his son holding tighter to his hand. "You'll see. But first, can we talk inside? It's hard to shout over a helicopter." Hannah blinked, disoriented. "Inside, just for a minute," he said, his voice calm, steady against the chaos. "I owe you a story." The absurdity of it all, her unkempt hair, the bathrobe, the hovering machine, made her want to laugh and cry at once. But something in his tone, a quiet sincerity beneath the surreal, told her this wasn't a prank. She nodded slowly, motioning toward the door. "All right, come in." As Ryan guided his son across the walkway, the wind from the helicopter kicked up the fallen leaves, scattering them like golden sparks across the yard. The neighbors whispered and filmed, but Hannah barely noticed. She had the strange feeling that her life, which had felt small and predictable for so long, had just cracked open into something larger, something that hummed with possibility. And as the door closed behind them, the roar outside faded to a distant echo, leaving only the soft sound of breathing and the faint, trembling question that lingered between them. What happens now? Inside Hannah's modest kitchen, the air smelled faintly of cinnamon and toast. The small dining table, usually cluttered with homework and unopened mail, now held something entirely different: a man in a suit and his curious young son. Ryan brushed the dust from his jacket as he sat down, his movements careful, almost reverent, as if aware he was intruding on a private world. Lily peeked from the hallway, wide-eyed. "Mom, is that a real helicopter?" she whispered. Hannah gave her a faint smile. "Looks like it." Then, turning to Ryan, she tried to steady her voice. "So, you said you owed me a story?" He nodded. "I do." He opened a briefcase and set a thin tablet on the table. The screen came to life, displaying a headline that made Hannah blink. "Small-town mechanics drone saves hiker lost in Vermont snowstorm." "That's you?" she asked quietly. Ryan nodded again, eyes soft but proud. "Yeah. My wife started this project before she passed away, a rescue drone. I've been trying to finish it for years, mostly in my garage after long shifts. No one believed in it. But last night, someone found my old demo online. They used the prototype during an actual search and rescue mission. It worked. It saved a woman's life. Hannah leaned forward, her hands clasped. That's incredible, Ryan. He smiled faintly, the kind that carried both triumph and disbelief. After that, everything changed. The footage went viral. By sunrise, I had an offer from an investor who wants to fund production. Real funding. Research, manufacturing, the whole thing. She stared at him, the words sinking in slowly. That's amazing. But what does that have to do with me? Ryan reached into his jacket and placed an envelope on the table between them. His son watched, curious but quiet. Before I signed anything, I told them I had somewhere to be first. Here. Hannah frowned, confused. I don't understand. He took a deep breath. Yesterday, when I was short on change, I almost walked out of that coffee shop. But you stepped in. Because of that, I stayed just long enough to overhear a man behind me talking about a startup grant program for small inventors. That's the same program that connected me to the investors who called this morning. Hannah's breath caught. You mean? I mean that your kindness set everything in motion, he said gently. You didn't just buy me coffee. You gave me the moment I needed to keep trying. For a long beat, neither of them spoke. Hannah stared at the envelope, heart pounding. Ryan slid it closer. That's for you. Enough to cover your bills, fix your roof, maybe breathe a little easier. It's from me, and from the people who believed in what you made possible. Tears welled in her eyes. Ryan, I can't accept this. He shook his head. You can. Because you reminded me I wasn't invisible. Lily stepped forward, peeking over the table. Mom, is that man rich now? Ryan chuckled softly, glancing at the girl. Not rich yet, kiddo. Just lucky. Hannah wiped her eyes, a fragile smile breaking through. Maybe lucky enough to stop by for dinner sometime? Ryan looked up, surprised, but there was warmth in his gaze, something new and unspoken. Only if you promise not to pay next time, he said. Hannah laughed softly. Deal. Outside, the helicopter waited patiently, its blades still. Inside, at a small table under the morning light, something just as powerful began to take flight. Quiet gratitude transforming into a connection neither of them had expected. That evening, the smell of rosemary and garlic filled Hannah's small kitchen, weaving through the air like a quiet promise that life could still be warm. The storm outside had settled into a steady drizzle, soft against the roof. She stood at the stove, stirring a pot of soup, her hands moving automatically, though her mind was still caught between disbelief and wonder. A helicopter had landed in her yard. A man she'd known for less than a day had given her hope wrapped in an envelope. And now, somehow, he was sitting at her kitchen table, sleeves rolled up, helping Lily and his son, Eli, fold paper airplanes. Lily giggled as her plane nose-dived into the salt shaker. You made it too heavy, she accused playfully. Eli laughed, waving his own masterpiece in victory. Mine's better. It can fly to the moon. Ryan leaned back in his chair, smiling, his rough hands looking oddly out of place against the fragile paper. You two are natural engineers, he said, mock serious. We might need to hire you both. Do engineers get dessert? Lily asked, tilting her head. Only if their mom lets them, Ryan replied with a grin. Hannah turned from the stove, watching them, her heart softening at the sight. For the first time in years, laughter filled the small space where worry usually lived. She ladled soup into bowls, placing them on the table. You sure you don't want me to help? Ryan asked, half standing. You helped enough by showing up in a helicopter, she teased. He chuckled. Guess that was a little dramatic. A little? Half the neighborhood thinks I'm dating a movie star now. They both laughed, and the sound, gentle, real, seemed to settle something inside her. Over dinner, conversation flowed easily. Ryan told her about Emma, his late wife, how she'd spent her last months sketching designs for a drone that could reach disaster victims faster than any rescue team. Finishing her project, he said, was the only way he knew to keep her alive. I thought it was impossible, he admitted quietly. Every night I'd come home, see her drawings, and wonder if I was foolish to keep trying. But last night, when I got that message, he trailed off, looking at his son. It felt like she was there, like she'd finally seen me finish what we started. Hannah listened, her eyes glistening, her spoon still in midair. She'd be proud, she said softly. I don't even know her, but I can feel that. Ryan's smile wavered, grateful but raw. I used to think my life ended when she passed. But she wouldn't have wanted me to stop living. She'd want me to keep finding reasons to care. Hannah nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Yesterday, you reminded me what that looks like. Sometimes I forget there's still kindness left in the world. For a while, silence lingered, but it wasn't empty. The kids' laughter floated in from the living room, where they now raced their paper planes under the glow of a lamp. Two innocent voices untouched by the pain their parents carried. Ryan looked around the room. The mismatched chairs, the chipped mugs, the soft hum of life returning. You've got a good home here, he said. It's small, Hannah replied quietly, but it's ours. Outside, the rain thickened, tapping against the windows like a steady heartbeat. Inside, for lives, once separate and weary, had begun to weave together in ways none of them could have planned. For the first time in years, Hannah didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was beginning again. The rain had quieted to a mist by the time the evening settled into its calm. The dishes sat stacked beside the sink, and the scent of soup still lingered faintly in the air. Lily and Eli had fallen asleep on the couch, their heads tilted toward each other, surrounded by paper airplanes and half-finished drawings. The television played softly in the background, the screen flickering with light that touched their peaceful faces. Hannah stood by the counter, drying her hands on a towel, while Ryan watched the children from across the room. They look like they've known each other forever, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. Kids don't carry the same walls we do, she replied, glancing at him. They just meet someone and decide it's okay to trust them. Ryan smiled faintly. Wish adults worked that way. For a few seconds, they both just stood there in the quiet, listening to the faint hum of the heater. Then Ryan cleared his throat. You sure you don't want help cleaning up? Hannah shook her head. You cooked half the soup. That's help enough. He chuckled, walking toward the doorway, his jacket draped over his arm. You've got a good home here. It's small, she said softly, but it's ours. He hesitated at the threshold, turning to face her. Something about the moment felt unfinished, suspended between gratitude and something deeper. There's something I didn't tell you earlier, he began, his tone cautious. She folded the towel in her hands. What's that? The investors want to expand the project, Cooper Aerotech. They asked if I'd set up headquarters here, in town. I said yes. He paused, studying her face. But I need someone I can trust, someone who understands people, not just machines. Hannah blinked. Ryan, I'm no engineer. I wouldn't know where to start. He smiled, a soft, knowing expression. That's exactly why I want you. You're better. You understand life the way most people just pretend to. You know what it's like to get back up when everything falls apart. That's the kind of voice I want on my team. She stared at him, disbelief flickering into something else. Hope, fragile and unfamiliar. You're serious? Completely, he said. I want you to be our community director. Full salary. Benefits. Real work, meaningful work. Her lips parted, but no words came. She'd spent so many years scraping by, doing what she had to, not what she wanted to. Ryan, I don't even know what to say. Say yes, he said simply. It's not charity, Hannah. It's partnership. You believed in me when no one else did. You changed the course of my life in a way you'll never fully see. Let me give you a chance to do the same for yourself. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from the slow, dawning realization that maybe kindness really did circle back, not as payment, but as purpose. You have no idea what this means to me, she whispered. He met her gaze gently. I think I do. Outside, the helicopter's navigation lights blinked through the mist, casting faint red and white reflections against the puddles on the road. Inside, two people stood in a quiet kitchen, both carrying years of loss, yet finally standing at the edge of something that looked like a beginning. Hannah nodded, steadying her breath. I'll take the job, but only if you promise. No more surprise landings in my yard. Ryan laughed softly, relief breaking through his composure. Deal. And for the first time that night, they both smiled, not because of what had been given or promised, but because something in both of them had quietly healed. The night had deepened into a calm silence by the time Ryan slipped on his jacket. The rain had stopped completely, leaving the world damp and shining under the streetlights. Through the living room window, the helicopter's faint lights pulsed steadily in the distance, reflecting off the wet pavement like stars caught on the ground. Lily stirred on the couch, her head resting against Eli's shoulder. Hannah tucked a blanket around both children, pausing for a moment to take in the sight. Two small lives at peace, untouched by the storm of adult worries. She straightened, turning toward Ryan, who stood quietly near the door, holding his coat but not quite ready to leave. "You sure you don't want to stay for dessert?" she asked softly. "We've got store-bought cookies. The expensive kind." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "Tempting, but I should probably go before the pilot thinks I've been kidnapped." Hannah smiled, her hands fidgeting lightly with the edge of her sleeve. "I still can't believe all this happened in one day." He looked around her small home, his expression full of something unspoken, admiration, maybe, or recognition. "I can," he said quietly. "Some people spend their whole lives waiting for a moment that changes everything. For me, it was a cup of coffee." Her throat tightened at that, and she stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You give me too much credit." Ryan shook his head. "Not enough, actually. You showed me that small kindness still matters." "That's not small at all." For a long moment, they simply stood there, two strangers bound by a single act that had turned into something neither could have planned. The air between them carried that rare weight of real gratitude, the kind that doesn't demand repayment. Finally, Ryan extended his hand. Not like a businessman, not like a man paying a debt, but like someone who had finally found peace. Hannah took it, her fingers trembling slightly as they closed around his. "Good luck, Ryan," she said. He smiled. "You too. Though something tells me you won't need luck anymore." Outside, the helicopter's engine began to hum again, its blades stirring the damp night air. Hannah followed him onto the porch, the wind brushing her hair against her face. Ryan paused at the bottom of the steps, turning back one last time. His expression was calm, grateful, illuminated briefly by the flashing navigation light. He mouthed the words, "Thank you." Hannah didn't trust her voice, so she simply nodded. The rotors grew louder, whipping up the fallen leaves across the yard as the helicopter lifted slowly into the air. She stood there, watching it rise until it became nothing but a shadow against the moonlit clouds. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was full, alive, pulsing with something new. Inside, Lily rubbed her eyes and whispered, "Was that Mr. Ryan leaving?" Hannah knelt beside her, brushing a curl from her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly, "but something tells me he'll be back." Lily smiled sleepily and nestled into the couch again. Hannah looked toward the window, where the last faint glimmer of the helicopter lights disappeared into the horizon. For years she had told her daughter that kindness always came back. That night, standing barefoot on her porch with the smell of rain still in the air, she finally believed it. Not as a saying, but as truth. The world outside was still and dark, but inside her chest, something had begun to glow, quiet, steady, and full of hope.